Hey there. Tonight, we're diving into something that might completely shatter your perception of those spontaneous viral moments that seem to capture the internet's attention out of nowhere. We're exploring the reality of viral marketing campaigns, where nothing is organic, everything is manufactured, and the human cost of engagement metrics would make factory working conditions look humane by comparison. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a quick like or subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Love seeing our little global community connect through these stories. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just been hired as the lead marketing executive for a viral campaign that's currently hemorrhaging money at a rate that would make venture capitalists weep. It's 3 a.m. You're sitting in a war room lit only by the glow of dashboard screens, showing engagement metrics that are all trending in the wrong direction. And you've just realized that everything you thought you knew about viral content was a carefully constructed lie designed to sell courses to aspiring influencers. The dashboard in front of you tells a story of failure that's both expensive and increasingly common in the modern marketing landscape. Your campaign has burned through $500,000 in 3 weeks and achieved an engagement rate of 0.003%. That's not a typo. That's 3 engagements per 100,000 impressions, which means your carefully crafted content is being actively ignored by 99.997% of the people who see it. Your predecessor, whose stress-induced breakdown led to your emergency hiring, left behind a manual that reads less like a marketing strategy and more like a confession from someone who spent too long staring into the algorithmic abyss. Nothing is organic. The first page declares in handwriting that becomes increasingly erratic as the document progresses. Every viral moment you've ever seen was manufactured through psychological manipulation, fake engagement, and tactics that would be illegal if regulators understood what we're actually doing. The campaign you've inherited is promoting a new energy drink called Surge, which tastes like battery acid mixed with artificial sweeteners, but has a marketing budget that could fund a small nation. Your job is to make people believe that drinking Surge is not just a beverage choice, but a lifestyle statement, an identity marker, and a social necessity. The fact that the product is mediocre and potentially harmful is considered irrelevant to your marketing objectives. The war room around you resembles a NASA mission control center designed by people who've never slept and no longer remember what natural light looks like. 27 monitors display real-time social media feeds, engagement metrics, competitor analysis, and algorithmic prediction models that use machine learning to identify the exact psychological vulnerabilities of your target demographic. Your team of 12 marketing specialists occupies workstations that each cost more than most people's annual salary. These aren't creative professionals developing authentic brand connections. They're psychological warfare experts who've weaponized behavioral science to manufacture consent and engineer viral spread through manipulation tactics that would make propaganda ministries jealous. The senior data scientist, whose eye twitches whenever engagement rates drop below threshold levels, explains the campaign architecture with the detachment of someone describing weather patterns rather than the systematic manipulation of human psychology. We've deployed 50,000 bot accounts across major platforms to create the illusion of organic interest, he says, while pointing to a graph that tracks fake engagement patterns. We're running simultaneous A divided by B tests on 500 content variations to identify which psychological triggers generate the most compulsive sharing behavior. This is when you learn that viral marketing operates according to principles that have nothing to do with creative excellence or authentic brand storytelling. Every successful viral campaign is built on a foundation of manufactured engagement designed to trick platform algorithms into amplifying content to real users who might actually care about the product. The bot network supporting your campaign represents a sophisticated operation that would impress cybersecurity experts. 50,000 fake accounts, each with generated profile pictures, stolen biographical information, and posting patterns designed to mimic real human behavior. These bots don't just like and share your content. They engage in conversations, create user-generated content, and build parasocial relationships with real users who don't realize they're forming emotional connections with algorithms. The cost structure of this operation reveals why most viral campaigns fail despite massive budget investments. Bot accounts cost between $2 and $5 each to create and maintain. 50,000 bots represent a $250,000 investment before producing any actual content or reaching any real humans. Platform detection systems constantly identify and eliminate fake accounts, requiring continuous investment in replacement bots to maintain the illusion of organic engagement. Your content strategy meeting reveals the creative process behind viral manufacturing. And it's nothing like the spontaneous creativity that viral success stories suggest. Every piece of content undergoes psychological analysis to identify emotional triggers that generate engagement. Videos are edited to optimize for the first 3 seconds that determine whether users scroll past or stop to watch. Captions are written using language patterns that algorithmic analysis suggests will generate compulsive sharing behavior. The A divided by B testing process operates with scientific precision that removes any element of creative intuition or authentic expression. Your team tests 500 variations of the same basic content concept, modifying elements like thumbnail images, caption length, emoji usage, posting times, and hashtag combinations. Each variation runs to sample audiences of 10,000 users, with engagement metrics determining which versions get promoted to larger audiences. This testing process reveals why viral content often feels manipulative and formulaic. It is manipulative and formulaic. Content that generates authentic emotional responses frequently performs worse than content designed through algorithmic optimization to trigger compulsive engagement, regardless of whether users actually enjoy or value the experience. The daily budget for your campaign exceeds $50,000. Split between paid advertising, influencer partnerships, bot maintenance, and content production. This spending occurs whether the campaign succeeds or fails, creating financial pressure that makes ethical considerations seem like luxuries that profitable companies cannot afford. Your first executive decision involves approving a tactic that your predecessor apparently refused to implement before their breakdown rage baiting. This strategy deliberately creates divisive content designed to generate angry responses because platform algorithms interpret any engagement, including negative engagement, as signal to amplify content to additional users. The rage-baiting proposal involves creating content that positions Surge Energy Drink as the beverage choice of a specific political ideology, knowing that this positioning will generate outrage from opposing political groups. The resulting comment wars will drive engagement metrics upward, regardless of whether anyone actually wants to buy the product. The fact that this strategy might contribute to political polarization and social fragmentation is considered outside the scope of your marketing responsibilities. The influencer partnership component of your campaign reveals another layer of manufactured authenticity that most consumers never recognize. You're paying micro-influencers between $500 and $5,000 each to create spontaneous content featuring Surge energy drinks. These partnerships come with detailed creative briefs, specifying exactly what influencers should say, how they should present the product, and which psychological appeals they should emphasize. The contracts require influencers to pretend these partnerships are organic product discoveries rather than paid advertisements. They must use phrases like, "I've been obsessed with," and "I genuinely love," while following scripts written by your marketing team. The Federal Trade Commission requires disclosure of paid partnerships, but your legal team has identified disclosure methods that technically comply with regulations while remaining nearly invisible to most viewers. The content creators working on your campaign occupy the bottom tier of the viral marketing ecosystem, and their working conditions would violate labor laws if they were classified as employees rather than independent contractors. They're producing 20 to 30 pieces of content daily, working 80-hour weeks, and earning barely above minimum wage when their compensation is calculated on an hourly basis. These creators sacrifice their mental health, personal relationships, and long-term career prospects to produce content that will be forgotten within 72 hours. Most of them are building unsustainable lifestyles based on the myth that viral success is achievable through hard work and creative talent rather than algorithmic manipulation and massive budget investments. Your campaign's creative director, who hasn't had an original idea in 5 years, explains the content theft strategy with remarkable casualness. We monitor emerging creators who develop innovative content formats, wait until their ideas show engagement potential, then reproduce their concepts with our budget and distribution advantages. By the time they notice we've stolen their work, we've already extracted maximum value and moved on to the next trend. This systematic theft operates within legal boundaries because copyright law doesn't protect general content concepts or formats, only specific creative expressions. Small creators who develop innovative ideas have no recourse when large marketing operations steal their creative work, reproduce it with higher production values, and use paid distribution to reach audiences that organic creators cannot access. The psychological toll of working in viral marketing becomes apparent during your first late-night strategy session. Team members discuss human behavior with the clinical detachment of scientists studying lab rats. Engagement metrics replace any consideration of whether content provides value to users. Success is measured entirely through numbers that indicate compulsive behavior patterns rather than genuine satisfaction or meaningful experiences. As your first week in the viral marketing world concludes, you've learned that everything spontaneous about social media is carefully orchestrated through manipulation tactics that most users never recognize. The authentic moments that seem to capture cultural zeitgeist are usually manufactured through bot networks, paid influencers, and psychological engineering designed to exploit human vulnerabilities for commercial gain. Tonight, you'll sleep for 4 hours before waking to check engagement metrics that determine whether you keep your job and whether your team continues burning $50,000 daily on a campaign that probably won't succeed, regardless of your efforts. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to compromise your ethics, new tactics that push boundaries of acceptable manipulation, and new understanding of why the viral marketing industry has higher burnout rates than emergency room physicians. Welcome to the engagement economy, where human attention is the product, psychological manipulation is the business model, and the fact that you're contributing to societal problems like addiction, polarization, and mental health crises is considered an acceptable externality of profitable marketing operations. Your second week, managing the surge campaign, begins with a crisis that will define everything that follows. Your engagement metrics have flatlined, despite doubling the budget, and the executive team has decided that playing it safe is what's killing the campaign. They want controversy. They want polarization. And they want you to engineer outrage that will force people to pay attention whether they want to or not. The strategy meeting feels less like marketing, planning, and more like psychological warfare tactics being developed by people who've lost touch with the fact that they're manipulating real humans rather than abstract data points. Your chief strategy officer, whose LinkedIn profile features words like disruptor and growth hacker, presents a plan that makes your stomach turn while simultaneously making perfect business sense according to the metrics that determine everyone's employment status. We're going to make Surge the energy drink that liberals hate, he announces with the enthusiasm of someone who's just solved a particularly challenging puzzle. We position it as the beverage of personal responsibility, bootstrap mentality, and traditional values. We don't actually need to say anything explicitly political. We just need to use the right cultural signifiers to activate tribal identities and let the algorithm amplify the resulting conflict. This is manufactured controversy as a service, and it operates with industrial efficiency that most people never recognize when they encounter it in their social media feeds. Your team begins producing content that features subtle political dog whistles designed to appeal to conservative audiences while triggering liberal critics. The energy drink itself hasn't changed, but the cultural meaning attached to it is being weaponized to generate engagement through polarization. The first piece of controversial content goes live at 6 a.m. on a Monday. Time to catch morning social media users when they're most likely to engage with emotionally charged material. It's a video featuring a conventionally attractive spokesperson talking about earning your energy and no participation trophies while drinking Surge. The political subtext is subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, while obvious enough to activate the tribal identities that drive compulsive engagement. The reaction unfolds exactly as your strategy team predicted, because human behavior on social media follows patterns that marketing professionals have mapped with scientific precision. Conservative users share the content enthusiastically, interpreting it as validation of their political identity. Liberal users respond with criticism and mockery, creating engagement through opposition. The resulting comment wars generate thousands of interactions that platform algorithms interpret as signal to amplify the content to even larger audiences. Your engagement metrics explode overnight. The content that was being ignored last week is suddenly generating millions of impressions and hundreds of thousands of interactions. The fact that most of these interactions are angry arguments between strangers who will never buy your product is irrelevant to the success metrics that determine your campaign's viability. This is when you learn that rage baiting operates according to psychological principles that exploit how human brains process social threats. When people encounter content that challenges their identity or values, their amygdala activates fight or flight responses that override rational thinking. They feel compelled to respond, to defend their tribe, to attack the perceived enemy. Platform algorithms don't distinguish between positive and negative engagement. So anger generates the same amplification benefits as genuine enthusiasm. The comment sections on your viral content resemble war zones, where thousands of strangers battle over cultural identity issues that have nothing to do with energy drinks. Your moderation team, outsourced to contractors in the Philippines who earn $2 per hour, works around the clock to remove content that violates platform policies, while leaving arguments that generate engagement but stay within acceptable boundaries. These moderators develop PTSD-like symptoms from constant exposure to toxic content, but they're classified as independent contractors rather than employees, which means your company has no responsibility for their mental health or working conditions. They're the invisible labor force that makes social media possible, and they're destroying their psychological well-being to maintain platforms that extract value from manufactured conflict. Your influencer partnerships enter a new phase that reveals the complete corruption of authenticity that defines modern social media. You're no longer just paying influencers to mention Surge in their content. You're paying them to perform elaborate scripts designed to look spontaneous, while hitting specific psychological triggers that your data scientists have identified as most effective for generating parasocial engagement. The influencer contracts now include detailed performance requirements that specify emotional tones, facial expressions, verbal patterns, and editing techniques that testing has proven generate maximum engagement. Influencers must film multiple takes until they achieve the exact emotional authenticity that your creative team has determined looks most genuine to viewers who don't realize they're watching performances optimized through algorithmic analysis. Sarah, a micro-influencer with 50,000 followers, exemplifies the exploitation dynamics that power the influencer economy. She's earning $3,000 for creating 5 pieces of Surge content, which sounds reasonable until you calculate that she's spending 40 hours researching trends, filming content, editing videos, engaging with comments, and managing the mental health consequences of performing authenticity for strangers who form emotional attachments to personas that don't actually exist. When you calculate her compensation on an hourly basis, Sarah is earning $75 per hour, which seems decent until you realize she has no benefits, no job security, no retirement contributions, and no prospect of this income continuing beyond the current campaign. She's building a lifestyle that requires constant hustle to maintain, knowing that algorithmic changes or shifting trends could make her unemployable overnight. The psychological cost of influencer work reveals itself during a status call where Sarah breaks down crying while discussing the pressure of maintaining her online persona. She can't express genuine opinions without risking her commercial partnerships. She can't take breaks without losing algorithmic favor. She can't have bad days without followers questioning whether they should continue supporting her. Her entire identity has become a performance optimized for engagement metrics rather than authentic human connection. But Sarah is one of the lucky ones. Most aspiring influencers never achieve partnership deals or meaningful income. They spend years producing content for free, building audiences that algorithms randomly throttle, and sacrificing their mental health for the vanishingly small possibility of achieving viral success that probably won't happen regardless of their talent or effort. Your campaign's tactics escalate as engagement plateaus and executive pressure intensifies. The strategy team proposes manufacturing a controversy that will force media coverage and expand your audience beyond social media platforms. They want to create an incident where a public figure criticizes Surge, generating news stories that reach people who don't follow your social media accounts. The manufactured controversy involves paying a washed-up celebrity known for provocative statements to criticize Surge as representing everything wrong with modern culture. Your team has already prepared response content, purchased promoted tweets to amplify the story, and coordinated with friendly media outlets to cover the resulting conflict. The entire incident is scripted like a professional wrestling match, designed to generate attention while maintaining plausible authenticity. This tactic reveals how much of viral culture consists of manufactured moments designed to look spontaneous. The celebrity feuds, brand conflicts, and cultural controversies that seem to emerge organically are often carefully orchestrated by marketing teams who understand that attention is scarce and conflict is the most reliable method for capturing it. The execution unfolds exactly as planned because your team has engineered every variable except the unpredictable human element that will eventually destroy your campaign. The celebrity posts their criticism at peak traffic time on Tuesday afternoon. Your response content goes live within 15 minutes, appearing spontaneous while actually implementing strategy that was developed weeks earlier. Media outlets cover the controversy, generating millions of additional impressions beyond your paid distribution. Engagement metrics explode again. But this time something unexpected happens. Real users begin creating unauthorized content that criticizes both the celebrity and your brand for staging an obvious publicity stunt. Your manufactured controversy has been recognized as manipulation, and the resulting backlash threatens to undermine months of carefully constructed brand positioning. The dark pattern tactics in your campaign represent another category of manipulation that operates below most users' conscious awareness. Your team has designed every user interaction to maximize the likelihood that people will take actions they don't actually want to take, using interface design principles that exploit cognitive vulnerabilities. The contest promotions require users to grant extensive permissions to access their social media accounts, buried in terms of service that no one reads. The limited time offer creates false urgency through countdown timers that reset constantly. The social proof displays show thousands of people just claimed this offer using numbers generated by algorithms rather than actual user behavior. Every element is designed to trigger compulsive decisions that rational consideration would reject. Your team's data scientists have mapped the exact psychological vulnerabilities that these tactics exploit. They know which colors generate urgency, which words trigger loss aversion, which social proof mechanisms activate tribal conformity, and which scarcity signals bypass rational evaluation. This knowledge allows them to design experiences that manipulate behavior with precision that users never recognize unless it's explicitly pointed out. The privacy invasion supporting your targeting capabilities would horrify users if they understood the depth of data collection and psychological profiling that enables modern marketing. Your campaign doesn't just target demographics like age, gender, and location. It targets psychographic profiles that identify users' insecurities, aspirations, relationship problems, political beliefs, and emotional vulnerabilities. The data feeding these profiles comes from sources that most users don't realize they're providing. Location tracking reveals patterns that indicate relationship status, employment stability, and lifestyle choices. Engagement patterns identify emotional states, attention span, and susceptibility to different manipulation tactics. Purchase history reveals financial situation, aspiration gaps, and purchasing triggers. Your platform partnerships provide additional targeting capabilities that blur ethical boundaries so gradually that most marketing professionals don't notice they've crossed lines that should be inviolable. You can target users who've recently experienced relationship breakups, job losses, or other life transitions that make them more susceptible to emotional manipulation. You can exclude users who've demonstrated resistance to certain tactics, focusing your budget on individuals most likely to exhibit compulsive behavior. As your second week concludes, your campaign has achieved the viral engagement that executive leadership demanded. Millions of people are talking about Surge Energy Drink. Though most of the conversation consists of arguments about political tribalism rather than genuine product interest. Your success metrics look impressive on dashboards that executives will present to investors, even though actual sales data suggests most of this engagement won't convert to revenue. Tonight, you'll sleep with the knowledge that you've contributed to political polarization, exploited psychological vulnerabilities, and manufactured cultural conflict for commercial gain. Tomorrow will bring new tactics that push ethical boundaries even further. New opportunities to question whether viral success justifies the human cost. And new understanding of why marketing professionals have some of the highest rates of moral injury in any professional field. Welcome to Engagement Engineering, where every human interaction is optimized for compulsive behavior, where authenticity is a performance managed through algorithmic analysis, and where the line between marketing and manipulation has disappeared entirely. Your third week managing the Surge campaign begins with a discovery that will haunt your conscience. For years afterward, the viral content generating millions of engagements is being produced in conditions that make Amazon warehouses look like wellness retreats. Behind every spontaneous-seeming TikTok, every authentic-appearing Instagram story, and every relatable tweet is a network of content creators working themselves into breakdowns for compensation that barely covers their rent. The content production facility you visit on Monday morning doesn't call itself a sweatshop, but the distinction feels semantic when you observe the working conditions. 32 creators occupy a converted warehouse space lit by ring lights that never turn off and filled with backgrounds designed to look like authentic personal spaces, but are actually standardized sets used by multiple creators throughout each day. Maya, a 23-year-old creator who's been producing content for your campaign for 6 weeks, explains her schedule with the flat affect of someone describing a prison sentence rather than a creative career. She wakes at 5 a.m. to catch morning algorithm windows, produces content until midnight to hit evening engagement peaks, and sleeps in 4-hour blocks interrupted by notifications about trending topics that require immediate response. I'm contractually required to produce 20 pieces of content daily, Maya says while simultaneously filming a TikTok about her morning routine. That's actually her fourth morning routine of the day, because the previous three didn't achieve the authenticity aesthetic that your creative director demands. Each piece requires research, scripting, filming, editing, posting, and engagement management. The contract calculates compensation per piece rather than per hour, which means I'm earning about $7 per hour when you account for actual time invested. This is the economic reality of content creation that aspirational narratives carefully obscure. The influencers featured in success stories represent the tiniest fraction of creators who achieve sustainable income. The vast majority work in conditions that resemble gig economy exploitation, sacrificing their mental health and financial security for the vanishingly small possibility of achieving viral breakthrough that probably won't happen regardless of their effort. The content theft operation supporting your campaign reveals another dimension of exploitation that destroys creative innovation while concentrating wealth among established brands. Your team employs social media monitoring tools that identify emerging content formats before they achieve mainstream recognition. When these tools detect innovative approaches generating engagement, your operation reproduces the concepts with higher production values and paid distribution that overwhelm the original creators. Jake, a data analyst whose job involves identifying content to steal, describes the process with remarkable detachment. We monitor about 50,000 emerging creators continuously, using machine learning to identify formats that show early engagement signals. When we detect promising concepts, we analyze the psychological mechanics that make them effective, then reproduce those mechanics with our budget advantages. The original creators usually never know we've stolen their work until they see our versions generating millions more views than their originals. This systematic theft operates within legal boundaries because intellectual property law wasn't designed for the social media age. Copyright protects specific creative expressions but not underlying concepts or formats. A creator who develops an innovative way to present product reviews has no legal recourse when major brands reproduce their format with professional production and paid distribution. The economic consequences destroy creative innovation at its source. Emerging creators invest enormous effort developing novel approaches, only to watch established operations extract maximum value from their ideas within days of initial detection. The creators receive no compensation, no credit, and no benefit beyond the bitter knowledge that their innovation was valuable enough to steal but not valuable enough to fairly compensate. Your campaign's influencer partnership program reveals the complete corruption of authenticity that defines modern social media marketing. The 75 influencers creating content for Surge aren't expressing genuine product enthusiasm or authentic brand affinity. They're performing scripted authenticity according to detailed creative briefs that specify emotional tones, narrative structures, and psychological triggers that testing has proven most effective. The performance requirements have become so specific that influencers need acting training to convincingly deliver the spontaneous enthusiasm that your campaign requires. They must express surprise at discovering a product they've been paid thousands of dollars to promote. They must demonstrate genuine excitement about features that marketing teams developed specifically to generate social media content. They must build narratives about how Surge solved problems that creative directors invented because real product benefits aren't compelling enough to generate viral engagement. Aisha, an influencer with 200,000 followers, describes the psychological cost of performing authenticity with increasing desperation in her voice. I've been creating content for 7 years, and I can't remember the last time I expressed a genuine opinion or shared a real moment from my life. Every aspect of my online presence is managed by brand partnerships that require me to maintain specific personas that demographic research suggests will generate maximum engagement from my audience. The parasocial relationships that Aisha has built with her followers create additional ethical complications that keep her awake during the few hours she's not creating content. Her followers believe they have a genuine connection with her, sharing intimate details of their lives and seeking advice about serious problems. Aisha knows these relationships are built on performances optimized for engagement rather than authentic connection. But acknowledging this reality would destroy the commercial value that makes her partnerships possible. The mental health crisis among content creators has reached epidemic proportions. Though the industry discusses it only when acknowledging the problem generates engagement that can be monetized. Creators experience depression, anxiety, body dysmorphia, and identity fragmentation at rates that exceed high-risk occupations like emergency medicine and military combat. The constant performance of authenticity, combined with algorithmic unpredictability and financial precarity, creates psychological conditions that human brains aren't designed to tolerate. Your campaign employs a content moderator team that experiences trauma exposure equivalent to combat veterans, though their suffering generates no public sympathy or institutional support. These moderators review thousands of user comments daily, filtering spam, hate speech, threats, and content that violates platform policies while leaving arguments that generate engagement within acceptable boundaries. Raj, a content moderator working night shifts for $18 per hour, explains his work with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen too much of humanity's darkest impulses. I review about 800 comments per hour during peak periods, making split-second decisions about content that would require careful ethical consideration if I had time to think. The psychological protocol requires me to remain emotionally detached while processing content that includes death threats, hate speech, graphic violence, and abuse that would traumatize most people after a single exposure. The moderation guidelines Raj follows prioritize engagement preservation over user safety, allowing toxic content that generates interactions while removing content that might reduce platform activity. Comments expressing vague threats remain visible because they generate response threads, while comments criticizing advertising practices face immediate removal for violating commercial content policies. The ethical erosion affecting your campaign team operates through gradual normalization that makes each compromise seem reasonable in isolation, while the cumulative effect destroys moral foundations that team members once considered inviolable. 3 weeks ago, paying for bot engagement seemed unethical. 2 weeks ago, manufacturing controversy seemed manipulative. Last week, exploiting user vulnerabilities seemed predatory. This week, these tactics feel like standard business practices that everyone accepts as necessary for competitive success. The team meetings now discuss psychological manipulation tactics with the clinical detachment that indicates moral injury among professionals who've spent too long compromising their values for employment security. Targeting users during vulnerable emotional states is described as optimizing conversion windows. Exploiting parasocial relationships is characterized as leveraging influencer equity. Manufacturing outrage is presented as engagement architecture. Your creative director has developed a particularly disturbing innovation that pushes ethical boundaries beyond anything you've encountered previously. The campaign will target users who demonstrate signs of depression or anxiety based on their social media activity patterns, serving them content designed to exploit their emotional vulnerabilities by positioning Surge as a solution to problems that energy drinks cannot actually address. The targeting algorithms identify users posting about exhaustion, motivation problems, or feeling overwhelmed by life responsibilities. These users receive content featuring narratives about overcoming challenges through personal determination, aided by convenient energy boosts. The messaging carefully avoids explicit health claims while creating associations between product consumption and emotional well-being that exploit vulnerable users' desperate desire for simple solutions to complex problems. This tactic operates within legal boundaries while crossing ethical lines that most reasonable people would consider inviolable. You're not making false health claims that would violate FDA regulations. You're not explicitly promising mental health benefits that would constitute fraud. You're simply targeting people when they're most vulnerable to emotional manipulation and positioning your product as part of narratives that suggest solutions to their problems. The demographic targeting for your campaign has expanded to include tactics that would horrify parents if they understood how aggressively brands pursue their children. Your team targets users as young as 13, the minimum age for most social media platforms, using techniques designed to establish brand loyalty before these users develop critical thinking skills that might resist manipulation. The content designed for teenage audiences exploits developmental psychology insights about identity formation, peer acceptance, and social anxiety that characterize adolescence. Videos feature scenarios where social acceptance depends on consumption choices, where personal identity is expressed through brand affiliations, and where fitting in requires participating in commercial trends that teenagers don't recognize as marketing. The influencers creating content for teenage audiences are carefully selected to appear slightly older and cooler than the target demographic, creating aspiration dynamics that drive product association with desired social status. These influencers perform friendships and social connections that teenagers crave, with brands seamlessly integrated into narratives about belonging and acceptance. Your campaign's data harvesting operation collects information about users that most of them would never knowingly share if they understood the depth of surveillance supporting modern marketing. Every interaction generates data points that feed psychological profiles used for increasingly precise manipulation. The data includes not just obvious information like age and location, but behavioral patterns that reveal personality traits, emotional states, vulnerability factors, and purchasing triggers. The algorithms analyzing this data can predict user behavior with accuracy that feels supernatural, but is actually just applied mathematics, exploiting how human psychology operates according to patterns that most people don't consciously recognize. Your targeting systems know when users are most likely to make impulsive purchases, when they're most vulnerable to emotional appeals, and when they're most susceptible to social proof mechanisms. The financial reality of your content operation reveals why creator exploitation is business model rather than unfortunate side effect. Your campaign spends $300,000 monthly on content production, which sounds substantial until you calculate that this budget supports 87 creators producing over 50,000 pieces of content. The per-piece compensation averages less than $6. And that's before accounting for the time creators invest in research, filming, editing, and engagement management. Most creators accept these terms because the alternative is producing content for free while hoping to achieve organic growth that algorithms deliberately suppress to force dependence on paid promotion. The system is designed to extract maximum labor at minimum compensation while maintaining the illusion that viral success is achievable through talent and persistence rather than budget and manipulation. As your third week concludes, you've overseen the production of thousands of pieces of content by creators working in conditions that violate every principle of fair labor, while generating engagement metrics that executives will present as campaign success. The fact that this success is built on systematic exploitation of vulnerable workers, psychological manipulation of users, and theft of creative innovation from independent creators is considered irrelevant to the metrics that determine campaign viability. Tonight, you'll sleep knowing that your campaign has contributed to the mental health crisis affecting content creators, the erosion of authentic human connection, and the normalization of exploitation as standard business practice. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to witness how viral marketing has created an economy that treats human creativity as raw material to be extracted, processed, and discarded when it no longer generates profitable engagement. Welcome to the content industrial complex, where creativity is commodified, authenticity is performed, and the line between employment and exploitation has disappeared entirely. Your fourth week managing the surge campaign begins with a notification that makes your blood run cold. Your manufactured controversy has escaped your control and mutated into something far more dangerous than anyone anticipated. What started as carefully orchestrated rage baiting has evolved into a genuine cultural firestorm that's destroying careers, radicalizing communities, and generating the kind of attention that makes lawyers nervous and executives start looking for scapegoats. The crisis unfolds at 2:37 a.m. when you receive an emergency notification that one of your influencer partners has been doxxed by users who've decided that promoting Surge represents complicity with the political ideology your campaign has been dog whistling. The influencer's home address, phone number, family information, and workplace details are now circulating across platforms, accompanied by calls for harassment that platform moderation systems aren't catching fast enough to prevent real-world consequences. By morning, the situation has escalated beyond anything your crisis management protocols anticipated. The doxed influencer has received hundreds of threatening messages. Her employer has placed her on administrative leave to avoid association with the controversy. And local news outlets are covering the story as an example of cancel culture run amok. Your carefully manufactured engagement has transformed into a mob justice scenario where real humans are experiencing genuine harm. This is when you learn that viral content operates according to principles that nobody fully controls once the algorithmic amplification exceeds certain thresholds. Your team engineered controversy to generate engagement. But engagement doesn't distinguish between productive discourse and destructive mob behavior. Platform algorithms amplify whatever generates interactions, creating feedback loops where the most extreme voices receive the most visibility and moderate perspectives disappear beneath waves of performative outrage. The legal team arrives at your office by 9 a.m. with expressions suggesting they're already calculating litigation exposure and preparing defensive strategies. The campaign that seemed clever 3 weeks ago now represents potential liability for harassment, defamation, and negligent infliction of emotional distress. The contracts with influencers contain indemnification clauses that shift liability away from your company. But these legal protections don't eliminate the reputational damage or ethical responsibility. Your executive leadership responds to the crisis with the moral clarity that characterizes corporate decision-making. Under pressure, they want to know whether this controversy will increase or decrease sales projections. The human suffering involved is relevant only to the extent that it affects brand perception among target demographics. If the doxing generates sympathy that translates to purchases, it's a crisis that can be managed. If it generates boycotts that affect revenue, it's a disaster that requires immediate course correction. The social media dynamics of the crisis reveal how quickly manufactured engagement can evolve into genuine cultural warfare. Users who initially engaged with your content for entertainment or political signaling are now organizing harassment campaigns against anyone associated with Surge. Competing brands are amplifying the controversy to damage your market position. Media outlets are covering the story because outrage generates traffic regardless of accuracy or context. Your campaign has inadvertently created a focal point for cultural conflicts that have nothing to do with energy drinks but everything to do with how social media platforms have weaponized human tribal instincts for engagement optimization. People aren't actually angry about beverage marketing. They're angry about political polarization, economic anxiety, and social changes that leave them feeling powerless. Your campaign provided a convenient target for rage that was already seeking outlets. The influencer mental health casualties begin accumulating faster than your crisis management team can address them. 3 influencers have quit the campaign entirely, deleting content and issuing apologies that won't protect them from users who've already decided they represent everything wrong with society. 2 influencers have been hospitalized for anxiety attacks triggered by constant harassment. 1 influencer has hired private security after receiving credible death threats that local police acknowledge but claim they cannot prevent. Maya, the creator you met last week, calls you at 11 p.m. with panic in her voice that no amount of professional distance can ignore. They found my parents' address, she says, through tears that sound like they've been falling for hours. Someone posted photos of their house with captions about making me accountable for promoting fascist beverages. My mom is terrified. My dad wants to hire lawyers. And I can't explain to them that this is just how social media works now, because I'm not sure I believe that anymore. This conversation forces you to confront the human cost of engagement metrics in ways that dashboard analytics carefully obscure. Maya is 23 years old, earning subsistence wages for creating content that seemed harmless until your campaign's manufactured controversy transformed her into a target for strangers who've decided that her existence represents ideological opposition. The fact that she was just trying to pay rent by promoting energy drinks is irrelevant to users who've been conditioned to express political identity through consumption choices and to punish anyone who makes different choices. The platform response to the crisis reveals how social media companies prioritize engagement preservation over user safety. Until legal or regulatory pressure forces intervention, your reports about harassment, doxing, and threats receive automated responses suggesting that the content doesn't violate community standards. The harassment continues, spreading across platforms, while moderation systems designed to remove nipple exposure and copyrighted music fail to detect coordinated campaigns targeting real humans with real consequences. The algorithmic amplification continues promoting the controversy because the harassment generates massive engagement that platforms interpret as valuable user activity. Every threatening comment, every doxing post, every call for boycotts signals to algorithms that this content is worth promoting to additional users. The systems designed to maximize engagement have no mechanism for distinguishing between healthy discourse and mob violence. Your campaign's data reveals that the controversy is actually increasing brand awareness and purchase consideration among your core demographic, which creates a perverse incentive structure where influencer suffering translates directly to campaign success. The executive team views these metrics as evidence that the strategy is working despite minor complications. The fact that minor complications includes death threats and mental health crises is considered unfortunate but ultimately secondary to shareholder value optimization. The boycott movement that emerges in response to your campaign demonstrates how viral marketing can create cultural polarization that extends far beyond original intentions. Users who've never tried Surge and never planned to try Surge are now organizing campaigns to pressure retailers to stop carrying the product. The boycott isn't really about energy drinks. It's about expressing political identity through consumption choices and punishing brands that appear to affiliate with opposing tribes. Simultaneously, your target demographic is engaging in boycotts, purchasing Surge specifically to signal opposition to cancel culture and support for brands that refuse to apologize to online mobs. Neither group cares much about the actual product. They're using consumption as political performance in a culture war that your campaign manufactured but can no longer control. The media coverage escalates beyond social media, trades into mainstream outlets that frame the controversy as emblematic of deeper cultural problems. Think pieces appear, analyzing how brands exploit political polarization for engagement. Cable news segments debate whether boycotts represent free speech or censorship. Congressional representatives issue statements about platform accountability and the need for regulatory intervention. Your campaign has become a case study in how viral marketing can contribute to the cultural problems that make democratic society increasingly dysfunctional. The manufactured controversy, the algorithmic amplification, the mob dynamics, and the complete absence of institutional accountability represent everything wrong with how social media platforms have transformed human interaction into engagement metrics that optimize for divisiveness and destruction. The mental health crisis affecting your team members reveals how creating viral content damages not just audiences, but also the professionals who engineer these campaigns. Your creative director has developed insomnia that no medication seems to treat. Lying awake reviewing metrics that indicate campaign success, while knowing that success is being measured in human suffering. Your data scientists have started drinking heavily during work hours to cope with the cognitive dissonance of using their analytical skills to exploit psychological vulnerabilities. You find yourself experiencing what psychologists call moral injury. The psychological damage that occurs when professionals repeatedly act against their own ethical values because employment obligations require moral compromise. You entered marketing believing that you'd help connect valuable products with appreciative customers. Instead, you're managing campaigns that manufacture outrage, exploit vulnerabilities, and contribute to cultural problems that harm society while generating profits that you'll never substantially share. The toxicity has spread beyond professional boundaries into your personal relationships. Friends ask about your work with concern in their voices that suggests they're reconsidering whether they want to associate with someone involved in viral marketing. Family members share articles critical of influencer culture without realizing you're responsible for the exact practices being condemned. Your romantic partner suggests you might want to consider whether this career is compatible with the person you want to be. The audience addiction dynamics that your campaign has engineered become impossible to ignore when you review behavioral data, showing how users interact with your content. The engagement patterns resemble substance addiction more than consumer interest. Users check your campaign content compulsively, often reporting that they don't enjoy the experience but feel unable to stop engaging. The dopamine manipulation that your team engineered has created compulsive behavior patterns that users recognize as problematic but cannot easily interrupt. The demographic data reveals particularly disturbing patterns among teenage users who formed identities around brand affiliations that your campaign manufactured. These teenagers aren't just consuming content. They're building social hierarchies based on consumption choices, excluding peers who make different beverage decisions, and experiencing genuine emotional distress when their brand loyalties are challenged by classmates who've affiliated with competing products. Your targeting algorithms have successfully exploited developmental psychology to establish brand loyalty before these users develop critical thinking skills that might resist manipulation. The success represents a triumph of behavioral engineering and a catastrophic failure of ethical marketing. You've helped create a generation that's been conditioned to express identity through consumption, while experiencing anxiety about whether their choices signal appropriate tribal affiliations. The platform manipulation tactics that seemed clever during campaign planning have created consequences that extend beyond your campaign into broader platform dysfunction. Your bot networks have contributed to the information ecosystem degradation that makes it increasingly difficult for users to distinguish between authentic and manufactured engagement. Your rage baiting has normalized controversy as engagement strategy, encouraging other brands to adopt similar tactics that increase cultural polarization. The content theft operation has discouraged creative innovation by demonstrating that emerging creators cannot profit from their ideas before established operations extract maximum value. The psychological targeting has established precedents that enable increasingly predatory marketing practices. Your campaign's individual tactics represent minor ethical compromises, but the cumulative effect contributes to social media platforms becoming increasingly toxic environments that damage mental health, erode democratic discourse, and extract value from human vulnerability. As your fourth week concludes, you're managing a campaign that's simultaneously succeeding according to engagement metrics and failing according to any meaningful measure of ethical business practice or social responsibility. The controversy has generated hundreds of millions of impressions, increased brand awareness by 40% among target demographics, and contributed to mental health crises, harassment campaigns, and cultural polarization that will persist long after your campaign ends. Tonight, you'll sleep poorly knowing that the viral success executives celebrate is built on human suffering that includes death threats, mental health breakdowns, and mob dynamics that destroy lives while generating shareholder value. Tomorrow will bring new crises, new opportunities to question whether any product justifies the human cost of viral marketing, and new understanding of why so many marketing professionals eventually leave the industry with trauma that resembles combat veterans more than corporate employees. Welcome to Virality at Scale, where engagement metrics conceal human costs, where success is measured in attention regardless of consequences, and where the systems designed to connect people are actually tearing society apart one campaign at a time. Your final week managing the Surge campaign doesn't begin with a crisis meeting or an algorithmic breakthrough. It begins with silence. The kind of silence that follows when systems everyone assumed were permanent suddenly stop functioning. And nobody knows whether the interruption is temporary or whether you've just witnessed the end of an era that defined how an entire generation understood commerce, communication, and identity. The notification arrives at 6:42 a.m. on Monday morning. TikTok has been banned in the United States. Not restricted. Not regulated. Not fined for violations. Banned. Completely. The platform that accounted for 67% of your campaign's engagement, 43% of your budget allocation, and essentially all of your strategy for reaching users under 25 years old has been eliminated by regulatory action that your contingency planning never seriously considered possible. Your phone begins vibrating with messages from team members who've just watched months of work become instantly worthless. The TikTok accounts that took weeks to optimize are now inaccessible. The influencer partnerships built around TikTok content strategies have lost their primary distribution channel. The algorithm insights that your data scientists spent months developing are now artifacts of a platform that no longer exists in your market. But the TikTok ban represents only the most dramatic symptom of a systemic collapse that's been building throughout your campaign. The entire foundation of viral marketing, algorithmic amplification, psychological manipulation, and manufactured engagement, is crumbling as platforms, regulators, and users simultaneously recognize that the attention economy has created social costs that exceed any commercial benefits. Instagram announces algorithm changes that dramatically reduce reach for branded content and paid partnerships, requiring explicit disclosure that essentially eliminates the manufactured authenticity that made influencer marketing viable. The new policies require partnerships to be disclosed not just in captions that users scroll past, but in prominent overlay text that appears throughout video content. Early testing shows that explicit disclosure reduces engagement by 73% because users consciously recognize they're being manipulated and reflexively reject obvious marketing. YouTube implements restrictions that prohibit brands from targeting users based on psychological profiling, demographic vulnerability factors, or behavioral patterns that indicate emotional distress. Your entire targeting strategy, the system that made your campaign profitable by identifying users most susceptible to manipulation, has been declared a violation of platform policies that will be enforced through account termination and legal liability. Twitter eliminates the algorithmic timeline entirely, returning to chronological feeds that dramatically reduce the virality mechanics your campaign depends on. Content no longer receives automatic amplification based on engagement signals. Bot networks become ineffective because fake engagement doesn't generate algorithmic promotion. The organic reach that your strategy assumed would amplify paid content has essentially disappeared overnight. The regulatory environment shifts even faster than platform policies, as governments worldwide recognize that social media has created public health crises that require intervention comparable to tobacco regulation or environmental protection. The European Union implements comprehensive restrictions on psychological targeting, behavioral manipulation, and dark pattern design that make most modern marketing tactics explicitly illegal, with penalties that include criminal prosecution for executives. The United States follows with its own regulatory framework that treats data harvesting, psychological profiling, and manipulative design as violations of consumer protection laws. The legislation includes private right of action, meaning individual users can sue brands for damages caused by manipulative marketing. Your legal team estimates that your campaign has created liability exposure exceeding $50 million in potential class action damages. The economic collapse of the influencer industry follows inevitably once the mechanisms supporting manufactured virality stop functioning. Brands that were spending billions annually on influencer partnerships pull budgets as engagement rates plummet, and conversion metrics reveal that most influencer marketing never generated meaningful revenue. The industry built on the myth that authentic connections could be purchased at scale collapses once authenticity can no longer be convincingly performed. Maya calls you on Tuesday afternoon, and her voice carries a strange mixture of relief and despair that perfectly captures the moment. My partnership income disappeared overnight. She says, every brand canceled contracts because the disclosure requirements killed engagement rates. I was making $40,000 annually from partnerships, which wasn't enough to live on, but was more than I'd make in any job that would hire someone whose only qualification is being good at performing authenticity for strangers who don't trust anything I say anymore. The human cost of the influencer economy's collapse reveals itself in statistics that make your earlier concerns about mental health seem quaintly optimistic. Thousands of full-time creators discover that their years building audiences and developing content skills have created no transferable career qualifications. The algorithms they mastered no longer function. The platforms they dominated no longer exist or have changed so fundamentally that previous expertise is worthless. The personal brands they built are now toxic associations that make traditional employment more difficult rather than easier. The suicide rate among former influencers triples within 6 months of the platform changes. Though media coverage focuses on other explanations because acknowledging that social media careers created mental health crises that persist after the career's end would require uncomfortable conversations about who bears responsibility for systems that encouraged young people to sacrifice their well-being for engagement metrics. Your campaign's content creators face particularly devastating consequences because they never achieved the name recognition or financial success that might provide transition opportunities. They invested years developing skills that became obsolete overnight while sacrificing education, career development, and relationship stability for opportunities that turned out to be temporary, regardless of their talent or dedication. The bot networks that provided the foundation for manufactured virality become completely worthless as platforms implement verification systems that require biometric authentication for account creation. The 50,000 fake accounts that cost your campaign $200,000 to create and maintain are eliminated in a single purge that removes hundreds of millions of bot accounts across all major platforms simultaneously. The data scientists who spent years developing psychological targeting systems discover that their expertise in exploitation is not merely worthless but actively toxic in a job market that's become hostile to professionals associated with the attention economy's excesses. Tech companies that previously competed to hire behavioral manipulation experts are now implementing ethical guidelines that prohibit employing anyone who worked on systems designed to exploit user vulnerabilities. Your creative director, whose career-defining achievement was engineering rage bait that generated millions of engagements while contributing to political polarization, finds that creative agencies won't interview candidates associated with viral marketing tactics that are now widely recognized as socially destructive. The portfolio that once demonstrated cutting-edge marketing innovation now represents evidence of professional ethics that make employers worry about legal liability and reputational risk. The financial reality of your campaign's failure extends beyond the immediate budget losses to reveal structural problems that make viral marketing economically unsustainable. Once artificial amplification mechanisms stop functioning, your campaign spent $7 million over 12 weeks generating engagement metrics that seemed impressive until conversion analysis revealed that actual sales increases attributable to the campaign totaled approximately $200,000. This means your campaign's return on investment was negative $6.8 million. And that's before accounting for legal liability, reputational damage, and opportunity costs of resources that could have been allocated to marketing approaches that weren't dependent on psychological manipulation and algorithmic gaming. The executive team that celebrated engagement metrics 3 weeks ago is now demanding explanations for why viral marketing generated spectacular attention while destroying shareholder value. The advertising industry enters a period of reckoning as brands collectively recognize that the metrics used to justify influencer marketing budgets were always fundamentally misleading. Engagement rates measured user attention but not purchase intent. Follower counts indicated audience size but not audience quality. Viral spread demonstrated content amplification but not commercial value. The entire industry was optimizing for metrics that correlated poorly with actual business objectives. The platforms themselves face existential crises as their business models collapse once regulatory requirements eliminate the behavioral manipulation and data exploitation that made targeted advertising profitable. Facebook's stock price drops by 62% as advertisers recognize that social media advertising without psychological targeting generates returns comparable to traditional media at costs that can't be justified. Instagram loses 40% of its daily active users as younger demographics abandon platforms that no longer offer the dopamine manipulation that made them compulsively engaging. The cultural shift happens faster than anyone anticipated, as users who've spent years feeling vaguely uncomfortable about social media suddenly have permission to acknowledge that these platforms made them miserable, and they're relieved to have excuses to quit. The mental health improvements are measurable within months. Anxiety and depression rates decline among teenagers who reduce social media usage. Political polarization decreases as people stop consuming outrage content designed to maximize engagement through tribal conflict. Your team members respond to the collapse with reactions that range from relief to devastation. The junior marketers who were just beginning their careers feel betrayed by an industry that promised creative fulfillment while delivering participation in systems that damage society. The senior executives who built careers on viral marketing face professional obsolescence as their expertise becomes not just worthless, but actively stigmatized. You find yourself in the strange position of having succeeded at your job, generating the engagement metrics your executives demanded, while simultaneously contributing to an industry collapse that makes your professional experience a liability rather than an asset. The campaign that looked like a career-defining achievement 3 weeks ago now represents evidence of participation in practices that society has collectively decided were unethical and destructive. The individual creators, influencers, and marketing professionals who built the attention economy weren't villains. They were people responding to incentive structures that rewarded manipulation while punishing ethical restraint. But the collective result of millions of individual decisions optimizing for engagement was a system that damaged mental health, eroded democratic discourse, and exploited human vulnerability for commercial gain. The archaeological evidence of the viral marketing era will persist in data archives and cultural memory. But the practical knowledge required to operate these systems has become instantly obsolete. Future marketing students will study this period the way current students study tobacco advertising, as an example of how industries can operate profitably for decades while creating social costs that eventually force regulatory intervention. Maya sends you a final message on Friday evening as you're cleaning out your office after accepting a severance package that's generous, considering your campaign's financial performance. I know we were all just doing our jobs. She writes, but I need you to understand that those jobs destroyed my mental health, stole years I'll never recover, and left me with no marketable skills beyond performing authenticity for algorithms that don't exist anymore. I don't know if you feel guilty about that, but I think you should. You don't respond because there's no response that would be adequate. She's right. You were doing your job, following industry best practices, implementing strategies that every marketing expert recommended. And the result was contributing to systems that damaged the mental health of creators like Maya, exploited the vulnerabilities of users who trusted that brands wouldn't deliberately manipulate them, and normalized business practices that treated human psychology as raw material to be extracted for shareholder value. As your final week ends, you understand that you've witnessed not just the failure of a campaign, but the collapse of an entire approach to commerce that treated human attention as an infinite resource that could be harvested through increasingly sophisticated exploitation. The viral marketing era is over. Ended not by better technology or more effective tactics, but by collective recognition that the social costs exceeded any commercial benefits. Tonight, you'll sleep without the anxiety of checking engagement metrics, without the moral injury of participating in systems you know are harmful, and without the pressure of optimizing every interaction for compulsive behavior. Tomorrow will bring uncertainty about career prospects and questions about how to build professional identity after your expertise became obsolete, but also relief that you're no longer contributing to the attention economy's destruction of human well-being. Sweet dreams of a world where marketing returns to providing useful information about valuable products instead of engineering psychological manipulation at scale. Where human attention is respected rather than exploited. Where social media platforms facilitate genuine connection rather than addiction and outrage. Where the metrics that matter measure human flourishing rather than engagement optimization. The viral marketing era is over. What comes next remains uncertain, but it can hardly be worse than what we're leaving behind.